Good morning, everybody. It's 7 o'clock. Abusing British values. The Home Secretary singles out the asylum system as a merry-go-round that's been exploited and links it to the Liverpool attack. More on that with the International Trade Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan shortly. Plus, how to head off headlines of sleaze as the PM reveals his plans for MPs' second jobs. We'll ask the shadow leader of the House of Commons, Thangam Debonair. Is it enough? And as the scandal engulfing cricket widens, we'll talk to the former England player Amjad Khan. Also, snakes are a pain. We meet the man trying to tackle Ibiza's reptile problem with his bare hands and... Your earworm for today, ladies and gentlemen. He's an 80s legend, reborn as a successful Las Vegas star. Now, Matt Goss is back with a new album. We'll chat with him later. It's Wednesday, the 17th of November.
Asylum system under attack, with reports that the Home Secretary has said the Liverpool attack is a reflection of a dysfunctional merry-go-round that's been exploited.
How much will families be squeezed this Christmas? Live this hour will bring you the latest inflation figures with a rise expected. Cricket crisis and more accusations of racism as the government calls on the England and Wales Cricket Board to take action. Cleaning up, but is a rebellion brewing? Some Tory backbenchers criticise the Prime Minister's plans to restrict second jobs. Border block, water cannon deployed as thousands of migrants try to reach Poland from Belarus. We're there live. And we'll go live to La Palma as the volcano continues to bring havoc to those living on the island. Just look at those pictures, my goodness. Good morning. It's been reported this morning that the Home Secretary says the man suspected of causing the explosion outside a Liverpool hospital was able to exploit what she calls Britain's dysfunctional asylum system. Priti Patel described the current setup as a complete merry-go-round. Martin Brunt is standing by for us with more. Martin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Kay. The police investigation has continued overnight, some searching still going on, but there are things the police still don't know, but they are making good progress. They say their suspect is dead. There appears to be no evidence of support network. So while all of that is continuing, the story is turning political. Edmund al-Swalemin was, we established yesterday, a failed asylum seeker. He came from somewhere in the Middle East here in 2014, and a year later had his asylum application rejected. He then appealed, and that appeal was also turned down. Now, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is using this bombing as an illustration of why she is right to reform the asylum system. She's embarked on that. There's a new bill going through Parliament sometime soon. And on a plane to Washington last night, where she's making a visit to the US, she spoke to reporters and said this: the case in Liverpool was a complete reflection of how dysfunctional, how broken the system has been in the past. It's a complete merry-go-round, and it has been exploited. Yesterday, when we were speaking to police and Home Office officials and unofficially, nobody was happy to talk about the bomber's current status.
OK, for now, Martin, thanks so much indeed. Last few seconds, we've just got the latest inflation figures for you. They are now up to 4.2%. In the 12 months to October 2021. Consumer Price Index, CPR, rose by 4.2% in the 12 months to October 21, up from 3.1% in September. The Trade Secretary, International Trade Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan is here. I suppose that means that public sector workers will have to get at least 4% just to stand still with a pay rise.
So I know that the Chancellor spoke about this in his budget, and the figures looking forwards identify that there would be a slight increase in inflation in the months ahead because of a number of the pressures that have come through as the economies have all kicked off again post-COVID. And he noted at the time that departments' settlements would be there so that they could, at a departmental level, have those conversations with their workforces, and that I'm sure will happen in the months ahead. And the independent review bodies will be able to work with their departmental teams to put forward the right proposition.
I mean, I've said to your colleagues in the past, I'm not very good at maths, but I mean, even I can figure out that it needs to be at least 4% just to stand still.
So indeed, that's what the peer review bodies are there for, to work with their own cohort of public sector workers and work with the departmental teams to get the right. So I'm sure we'll see that coming through in the months ahead. OK,
talk to me about Liverpool, if you would. We were all shocked about what happened. We've heard from the Home Secretary overnight. She says that what happened in Liverpool is the result of a dysfunctional asylum system. Is that what you think?
So what we saw was appalling. Thank goodness that the driver of the taxi wasn't more hurt, and I think we're all very grateful indeed for his bravery and his quick thinking, and hopefully he will be fully recovered, at least from his physical injuries, soon. I think what we see, and the Home Secretary obviously has spoken about it, and I'm sure will continue to as more evidence as this is looked at comes through, is that the challenge of ensuring that those who are asylum seekers who come to a country because they need our support, our care and the opportunity to live a safe life in the UK should get here in a safe way. So the huge amount of work that she's doing to stop gangs moving people around and abusing their vulnerability is something that she's very focused on fighting, so that we can make sure that as the kind and welcoming country that we always have been and continue to be, we make sure that those who really need our care and want to play their full part in UK society are the ones that come to the UK and receive our support.
But do you believe what happened in Liverpool is the result of a dysfunctional asylum system?
So, as the Home Secretary has already discussed, and she said it herself, that in the past this system hasn't been working, and she's been working incredibly hard in the last couple of years to really shake that down and make sure that it is coherent, works well and effectively, really importantly, so that those who are genuine asylum seekers and indeed who want to play a full and positive part in our communities in the UK, across the UK, are the people that are coming here and that we provide that support.
So you're agreeing with the Home Secretary?
So I think her point is well made.
I'm asking what your opinion is.
Well, so my opinion is that I want to see a system that works, that makes sure that those who are most vulnerable and indeed who want to come here and be a fully functioning part of our wonderful UK society are able to get here safely, not being abused by those gangs who are taking advantage of their vulnerability. So that's what we want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm talking particularly.
So I'm obviously not cited on the detail of the case and where the Home Secretary is, but I trust that her judgment of that situation and the timeframe in which the bomber in question came to the UK is one at a time when the system didn't work as effectively as it is now under her leadership.
So you're taking her word for it that the attack in Liverpool was directly connected to the asylum system in the UK?
So, as I say, I don't know the detail of the case, but
you're taking her word for it.
I think her point that the system historically had been dysfunctional and wasn't assessing with as much care as it needed to, and to make sure, as I say, that those who are coming here and getting our support through our asylum system are those who are the most vulnerable and who want to be a full part of our UK society when they get here.
Yeah, that would suggest that the whole case in Liverpool has been investigated and that's the end of it, because otherwise why would she say that? Well,
as the Home Secretary, she has a great deal more information at her fingertips and indeed more widely about the depth of the system than those of us who aren't working in the Home Office.
Yeah, what we need to be concerned about, though, is demonising all asylum seekers as potential terrorists.
Well, precisely the opposite to that, and that's her point, which is that for those who come here who we are able to provide asylum for and who wish to play a full part in our society are those that we want to see, and we want to support them, and we have some great systems, certainly in Northumberland, in my patch, we have taken in a large number of Syrian families over the last few years, and they are a wonderful, wonderful part of our community now. And, their children are now thoroughly part of the school system and very much, Northumbrians adoptees. And I think that's that's continues to be what the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister's focus is, to make sure that support is there for those families and individuals who are genuine asylum seekers.
Back to Liverpool, though, if I may. As far as the Mayor of Liverpool is concerned, we had him on the programme yesterday. He says the city won't be divided. There's a lot of nastiness online, he said, that's trying hatred on social media, as he put it. How does the Home Secretary's words about what happened in Liverpool being as a direct result of the dysfunctional asylum system help to unite the people of Liverpool this morning?
So I completely agree. I think some of the poison that social media can create is beyond unhelpful and can trigger all sorts of bad behaviour. And it's great to see the Voice of Liverpool, as we would expect, speaking as one, saying this was a traumatic and appalling event, but the town and all its communities will stand together against violence.
Yeah, but what
and I think that's... But the Home Secretary's words are very clearly about the historic nature of the system, and that now she and her team have been working very hard to make sure that it works better and fighting against those gangs who are trying to abuse the vulnerability of asylum seekers and their communities trying to reach a safe harbour.
OK, you say historic system, nature of the system, but, I mean, you guys have been in power for 11 years.
So, as I say, the Home Secretary's been in post for a couple of years, I suppose, and her work has been very focused on that. Well, as I say, I wasn't involved in that, and I think this is a continuing challenge. One of the really big challenges, and we see it obviously with some of the gangs abusing the system as they put vulnerable people into small boats trying to cross the Channel, amongst other places, and we've seen it over the years across the Mediterranean. Those most vulnerable families, and indeed young people who are seeking a safe life somewhere safe across European countries or indeed in the UK, we need to make sure that as the UK, we want to bring in those who are genuinely vulnerable and need that support and can be full part of our wonderful UK's communities, wherever they end up making their home here. So I think that continues to be the focus, and that she is driving towards a system which can ensure that we have control of our borders, so that we can make those decisions in a rational and compassionate way.
Nevertheless, how can you be critical of the historic nature of the system, which is letting in potential terrorists, in the words of the Home Secretary, when you guys have been in power for 11 years, as I said? So whose fault is it?
So the Home Secretary sits in the Home Office and looks after that, and when she came into post, she was determined to make sure that those criminal gangs who were abusing the system...
Were the Conservatives in government not doing that before?
So that's continued to be a developing case. I think as we've seen some appalling, very, very big migration movements because of war in a number of countries, the movements have changed, and indeed these criminal gangs who are abusing the vulnerability of those have moved and changed, and like all criminal gangs, whatever it is that they're up to, it's always a bit of a game of cat and mouse, and I think the Home Secretary has been very, very robust since she came into post to make sure that that was the case.
Who are you criticising for the historic nature of the system then? Whose fault is it?
So the system is complex, like so many government systems, and I think the Home Secretary's focus when she came into post was to make it as streamlined, as impactful as possible, because she has always been very clear that one of the...
So Sajid Javid wasn't up to the job?
Well, I don't think he was. I'm sure he did a very good job, but I think when the Present Home Secretary came in, and because we have seen this huge rise in criminal gangs abusing the vulnerability of those who are seeking safe harbour, that she has thrown the full weight of her focus behind that to make sure that we are able to give safe harbour to those who most need it. Many other countries obviously do the same, and that is our focus.
Didn't do that. Is that what you're saying?
So he was working with, but I think the point that the Home Secretary has made is that the system has had to become more robust as the gangs have used migration in a much more aggressive way for their own financial gain, and that has had to be a much greater focus, and that the present Home Secretary has spent a lot of time pushing it forward. Well, I think we've seen big increases in it in the last few years as a result of these terrible and devastating impacts of war across the world.
Indeed so, not least Afghanistan, and we saw what happened there in August. Talk to me about sleaze. Why have we seen a U-turn from the PM on second jobs?
So I was really pleased to see the PM's letter yesterday, which sets out two of the key issues which were raised in a 2018 report, putting out a whole series of propositions. I think the PM's point is well made. That, I mean, this is obviously run by the Commission. It's not determined by government. But his suggestion that the question of jobs that relate to political consultancy, so explaining to those, a business, how Parliament works, or indeed how how the machinery works is something that is not appropriate whilst you're a serving MP.
OK.
And indeed that the main focus of your time spent should be focusing on your work as an MP. And clearly, you might be Chris Bryant and you might be a brilliant author. You might, in your spare time, write books. You might be Maria Caulfield and an amazing nurse who does shifts at the weekend in her local hospital and so on. But that actually, if it's related to your skill set, that's fine. But if you're taking your time away from
Brilliant,
politics,
got it. That's the broad brush. I've got several supplementaries. Let's fire through them. What is reasonable limits on second jobs, which is the Prime Minister's wording? What is a reasonable limit? Is that the reasonable number of hours or a reasonable amount of money that you're earning?
So I certainly don't think it relates to cash because that's not a relevant metric. Depends what you do. Like all of us, you do jobs for different reasons. I think it's going to be about the focus of your day-to-day effort. Neither you or I work a 40-hour week in the jobs that we do, but we know when we've decided that we've had long days. I think the point, and that came from the Commission, which is the question about reasonableness is one that would, that the next question will be how do we assess that? And I think reasonable is something that's understood. So, the Chris Bryant author in his spare time
I've got several supplementaries. Let's rush through them because, of course, the vote is today. So other MPs will want to know who decides which second job is appropriate.
Well, so again, what the Prime Minister set out, and this was in the Commission report back in 2018, is to identify that if it's something to do with your work as an MP, so explaining as a political officer.
Who's going to make that decision?
Well, so I think the conversation which we'll discuss will be whether that sits with the Standards Commissioner or indeed a wider court, the committee. I mean, that will be a discussion for parliamentarians to have. I think what we want is someone who is able to apply a rational filter.
So potentially Catherine Stone. Will there be an appeal process if she says something? She says no, absolutely not. That's not counted. Who will you appeal to? Should there be an appeal process? Because as we know, there was a bit of an issue with appeals.
Yes. Well, I think that's exactly to your point. That's a really important question, which I have no doubt many colleagues will bring up, which is, should we be thinking about having a proper appeals process? So, well, all parliamentarians will put forward and support, or indeed not support, a proposition that's put forward in due course. The vote today is to put this into the next stage of the process.
Who will decide if there's an appeal, though? Who will decide? Who will judge an appeal?
Well, indeed, that would be part of the discussions that colleagues will want to have with the Committee on Standards to make sure that if we bring one in, and that indeed, as you say, is one of the reasons why there were discussions and anxieties over the Owen Paterson case, is that it's something that colleagues have confidence in, because I think that's important.
At this stage, we don't know what it's actually going to mean as far as reasonable limits, and we don't know what a second job might mean or not mean. We don't know who's going to be in charge necessarily, and we don't know who's going to be in charge of the appeal process if you necessarily want to appeal against a decision that's made about your second job. And the vote's today.
The vote is to move forwards for the next stage, and then the Standards Committee and the Commissioner will go away and bring forward a proposition. So this isn't a constant,
though, isn't it?
Well, you'd love us, and wouldn't we all love an instant and complete solution overnight? This is an opposition.
Those are the questions I just came up with off the top of my head in the cab on the way here.
Well,
I mean, seriously.
Quick as you like, but that's the point. This is an opposition day debate where we will discuss some of these issues, and colleagues will have an opportunity on both sides of the House to raise their concerns and indeed, hopefully, their suggestions on what.
Though, isn't it?
Well, welcome to Parliament. The complexity of how our system works never ceases to amaze all of us. Opposition day debates will bring the opportunity for this conversation to be had more fully, and then the parliamentary House systems will be able to come forwards with something which we can continue to move. As I think an appeals process, personally, I think is one that we want to think about bringing in. I think that's important.
We are out of time, but I just want to ask you about Caroline Noakes. Thoughts for her this morning?
So we have a robust system if there are concerns within the Conservative Party about that, and if Caroline obviously wanted to raise that through the party.
Absolute hammering on social media. I cannot read out some of the stuff that she's had to deal with. I'm just not going to read that out at breakfast time. No, there's no need at all. But, that is as a direct result of her standing up to be counted. Well,
indeed, and I'm very, very glad that anyone stands up to be counted if this sort of, as she suggests, behaviour goes on. It should always be called out.
You'll be investigating it, though, won't you? I'm guessing.
Well, I will leave Caroline to work with the party on that, but we have a robust system in place, and I hope very much that she will be able to work that through with the party machine. But more widely, this is something that, all of us who are women, not only in political life, in all sorts of life, have for far too long had to tolerate the sort of casual sexism, the wandering hand, that is completely unacceptable. And most men are as horrified as you or I are.
Yeah. What would you have done in that situation? I mean, if you'd done that...
At the time, I'd have probably slapped him, which arguably isn't a better response either, but it would have been an instinctive response from me. I think Caroline will have showed great, personal restraint if she quietly, moved away. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm of an age where you sit down at dinner and a hand would suddenly appear on my knee. You're like, excuse me, gentleman on my left who I don't know, could you remove your hand from my knee? That sort of casual sexism was not uncommon. It is much less common, thank goodness now, but we do have much better and robust systems, and any woman who receives that sort of abusive behaviour from someone absolutely should feel confident that she can stand up, both face them down, but also have the support of those around her to make sure that the abuser in question does not do that. This is not acceptable. And it's not acceptable whether it's to a woman or to a young man who are more vulnerable and indeed, less able to speak out. And we have much better systems in place to protect them. And I would always call anyone who feels under that sort of pressure to speak up, and we will all stand by them.
Hear, hear. It's good to talk to you. Thanks
Lovely
so much
to
for joining us.
Thank
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you are heading out this morning, then, of course, you can take us with you via our online services, of course, skynews.com. You can check out the blog there as well, if you would like to. And you can, in just a couple of minutes' time, Umar's busy fixing up our Twitters and tweets for you just at the moment. And the headlines from the interview that we did will be online in just a moment at Sky News, at Kay Burley. More on that breaking news we brought to you at the top of the programme and that is the latest inflation figures which are out. Our business correspondent Helen Smith is here. 4.1%?
4.2%, Kay, 4.2%. The consumer price index is what this is. So it's the cost of a standard basket of goods and services. And it's gone up 4.2% in October compared to what it was last year. Now, it's a big number. It's really, really significant. To put it in some sort of context, in September, inflation was about 3.1%, and there was sort of murmurings of concern about that. It's about the highest in a decade that we've seen, really confirming, I think, what a lot of families will have felt at home in the month of October, that the cost of living really, really is spiralling. And remember, the month of October as well was the month where the furlough scheme came to an end, that temporary uplift in universal credit came to an end, where there's tax rises as well that families are facing, the hike in national insurance. So a big cost of living crisis. Now, why is it so significant? There's a couple of, lots of things are going up. There's a couple of real key ones that are pushing it. Firstly, energy. We've heard so much about that soaring wholesale cost of energy. And in the month of October, Ofgem raised the energy price cap. So lots of families saw a 12% increase in the price of their energy. The other thing, Kay, was fuel. Fuel prices at the pump, we all know, have gone up hugely. They're at record highs at the moment. So there's a couple of the reasons. This will all raise a bit of more questions about whether those... whether the Bank of England will put up interest rates. That's one of the tools that will take some of the heat out of this market. There was a lot of surprise when they didn't do that at the beginning of November. A lot of eyes will now be on them as to whether they do that. They've got a tricky balance to strike, though, because keeping interest rates low, they're currently at historic lows, is part of the reason that they're part of the tools they're using to keep the economy sort of in check as it recovers after the pandemic. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, said something on this morning. He said, many countries are experiencing higher inflation as we recover from COVID, and we know people are facing pressures with the cost of living, which is why we are taking action worth more than £4.2 billion to help them. We're getting people into work, progress to keep more of what they earn through our plan for jobs. And sorry, I've lost... Oh, no, here we go. Sorry, I've got the rest of it here. We're helping people get into work, progress and keep more of what they earn through our plans for jobs and by effectively cutting taxes for workers receiving universal credit. We're also providing more immediate support, including through the £500 million household support fund for the most vulnerable families, fuel and alcohol duty freezers and the energy price cap. There were lots of things in his budget, Kay, that really tried to address some of those cost of living crisis problems, but families will really be feeling this big, big jump in inflation for sure.
OK, Helen Ann, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Immediate analysis there from Helen Ann. More in the next hour. Meantime, take immediate action. That's the call from the Prime Minister following allegations of years of racist abuse by former cricketer Azeem Rafiq. He told a parliamentary committee that English cricket is institutionally racist. Yorkshire County Cricket Club, along with current and former players, are now facing serious allegations. Becky Cottrell reports.
Rafiq gets his man at last.
His performance on the pitch is what Azeem Rafiq wanted to be remembered for. But now he has a bigger mission off the pitch, exposing the racism that ruined his time at Yorkshire Cricket and made him suicidal.
Felt isolated, humiliated at times, constant use of the word. In 2017 pre-season tour, we were in a place and Gary Balance walks over and goes, "Why are you talking to him? You know he's a or he's not a sheikh, he's got no oil." And this happened in front of teammates, it happened in front of coaching staff.
His former teammate Gary Balance has already admitted using the highly offensive P word towards Rafiq, saying there was no intended malice. Rafiq spoke of racism as the norm at Headingley, but said there were deeply personal and painful moments too.
When I lost my son, I went, you know what, hold on a minute. I've seen other players who have family tragedies and get support beyond measure. And I've just carried my son from the hospital to the graveyard, and how I'm getting treated here is not right. And to me, it became very clear that even myself, that I'd been looking the other way. And there's a real problem here, not just Yorkshire, throughout the country.
Rafiq says the abuse was also going on at his local club when he wasn't much older than these boys, training in Bradford. Many of them dream of turning professional, but they're alarmed by what they've heard.
This really doesn't help kids like us to progress. It doesn't boost our confidence, it lowers our confidence. And it just makes us really disappointed for seeing what's happening right now.
Ayan Hassan is 12 years old and would love to play for Yorkshire. He was shocked by the allegations.
It's made me think about why people do that at such a high level, because it takes effort to get there, and Azeem Rafiq, he tried hard to get there, so he shouldn't be having to face bullying or this sort of stuff.
These children feel the weight of the words of a British Asian player who says racism cost him his career. They're hoping changes will come out of this moment and make all the difference to their futures. Becky Cottrell, Sky News, Bradford.
Shingy standing by for us. Hello to you, Shingy. Good morning. My goodness me. The headlines this morning on all of the newspapers reflecting what happened yesterday.
Good morning, Kay. That's right. A number of newspapers saying that yesterday was cricket's day of shame. Azeem Rafiq, speaking in front of that select committee, visibly emotional at a number of points, spoke about his experiences of racism, beginning with his time as a youth player where he allegedly had red wine poured down his throat, to a number of instances in which the P word was used and teammates allegedly stood on by and watched this happening. Because of his words yesterday, cricket is now under the spotlight, with a number of people putting into question the sport's governing bodies, including Rafiq himself, who said that he felt let down by the ECB and the Professional Cricketers Association after going public with his allegations last year. And another person who's called for the cricket authorities to take immediate action is the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who tweeted this yesterday. Brave testimony from Azeem Rafiq. I commend him for speaking out. There is no excuse for racism anywhere in society, and we expect England Cricket and Yorkshire CCC to take immediate action in response to these allegations. I think, Kate, it's quite clear now that this is a story that goes beyond Headingley. It goes beyond Yorkshire Cricket. It's put the entire sport of cricket underneath the spotlight, and there will be serious questions about how the cricketing authorities deal with racism.
OK, thanks very much for the update. Thanks a lot. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, following the devastating evidence of racism in cricket from Azeem Rafiq, we'll get the thoughts of retired international cricketer Amjad Khan. We'll also look over the latest inflation data and explain what it actually means for you with Andrew Sentence, former member of the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee. We'll meet the British man who's trying to stop the Mediterranean island of Ibiza from becoming overrun by snakes. Dean Gallagher will join us later. And also this morning, have a look at these pictures. My goodness me, the volcano in La Palma still making its presence felt after now almost 2 months of eruption. Local news reported over the weekend that the volcano has claimed its first victim, a 72-year-old man who died at his family home in the exclusion zone. Scientists think the lava could keep coming for yet another month. Mother Nature looking like she's not going to give up the island anytime soon. Look at what happened here. 1 person's died, 2 missing after severe flooding in Canada. British Columbia was the worst affected area, with 2 days of torrential rain, shutting down roads and railways. And an update on a story we brought you yesterday morning on the programme. Joanna Lumley talked to us about the use of large underwater explosions, remember, to clear the seabed around Britain. Well, the blasts generally take place during the construction of wind farms and when underwater cables are laid. Just hours after our interview, the government produced a new policy proposal saying it wanted for companies to find alternative methods of clearance. Yesterday, Joanna told us why she was opposed to the explosions.
The sea blasts, it's called high order, which is the great explosions. You have to clear the seabed of the masses of munitions left over from the Second World War. What they do is they simply blow them up. So there's an enormous explosion. It damages the seabed irreparably. It sends out toxic particles into the ocean, kills fish. And almost most importantly, it damages the sonar of whales and dolphins, which means that they become stranded, they can't find their pods, they can't feed, they quite often die, or they just get lost and starve.
And as we were saying, it would appear hours later that the government has had a change of heart. Now, officials in New York say their New Year fireworks celebrations will take place this year. The event will be open to the public as normal, but everyone will have to show proof of vaccination to get into Times Square. Latest COVID data in the UK for you. Let's have a look. 37,243 new cases. There's also been a further 214 deaths. That brings the total number of deaths reported within 28 days of a positive test to 143,159 people who have died from COVID here in the UK. Quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Mild this week, rain and gales in the north at times, but Sunday looks much colder. For now, it's a mostly dry start, if rather chilly, but the windy north has showers, especially the northwest.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up, we're going to be letting you know what Anne-Marie Trevelyan for the government, just spoke to her about 20 minutes or so ago, what she would have done if someone had smacked her bottom at Tory party conference, as allegedly happened to Caroline Noakes. We'll have more on what she had to say. Fascinating response. Also, we'll speak to former international cricketer Amjad Khan following the devastating evidence of racism in cricket from Azim Rafiq. That to come. Hello again. The Trade Secretary has given her support to Conservative MP Caroline Noakes, who told Sky News that she was inappropriately touched by the father of the Prime Minister. Stanley Johnson has told us he had no recollection of Miss Noakes and no reply. Anne-Marie Trevelyan told us how she would have reacted if she had experienced inappropriate behaviour. What would you have done in that situation? I mean, if you'd done that...
At the time, I'd have probably slapped him. Which arguably isn't a better response either, but it would have been an instinctive response from me. I think Caroline will have showed great, personal restraint if she quietly, moved away. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm of an age where I used to sit down at dinner and a hand would suddenly appear on my knee. You'd like, excuse me, gentleman on my left who I don't know, could you remove your hand from my knee? That sort of casual sexism was not uncommon. It is much less common, thank goodness now, but we do have much better and robust systems, and any woman who receives that sort of abusive behaviour from someone absolutely should feel confident that she can stand up, both face them down, but also have the support of those around her to make sure that the abuser in question does not do that. This is not acceptable.
Strong words tomorrow.
Yeah, very strong words. And interesting that a cabinet minister is rowing in to support Caroline Noakes, who made this accusation on Sky News yesterday that the Prime Minister's father, Stanley Johnson, inappropriately touched her at a Conservative Party conference in 2003, followed then by a journalist at the New Statesman magazine saying something similar happened to her 2 years ago. Stanley Johnson denies knowing Miss Noakes. Downing Street officially yesterday wouldn't comment on any of this. Stanley Johnson is, of course, not an MP, not an elected politician, and they said this was an individual case. They didn't want to get into it, trying to distance themselves from it and suggest it's none of the Prime Minister's concern, although Labour and others have called for an investigation. So interesting to see cabinet ministers rowing in to support Miss Noakes, although she said she would have slapped him. What Caroline Noakes was saying is that as a candidate trying to climb the ladder, she didn't do anything and then later felt ashamed and now feels the need to speak out for people who can't in that moment do anything.
Sure. We also heard from the minister representing the government this morning about her views on what Priti Patel has been saying overnight.
Yes, Priti Patel has been telling journalists who are on a plane to the US with her that the case in Liverpool of the Liverpool bomber, which of course the police have only just started investigating, is a case of our dysfunctional and broken asylum system. And she says this merry-go-round of people being rejected and then trying to apply again. Anne-Marie Trevelyan didn't wholeheartedly agree with that, but she said the Home Secretary may know more about his motivations than she did, but going to be very controversial, those comments, given police have only just started investigating the motive, of course, and the idea that asylum seekers are coming to commit terrorism in some way is obviously, as you put to Anne-Marie Trevelyan, in the view of many people, is not going to be a way to bring the city of Liverpool together.
OK, tomorrow's Take, 9 o'clock.
See you then.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you. Meantime, the Prime Minister says the England and Wales Cricket Board must respond following Azim Rafiq's evidence to Parliament of highly offensive racist language and what he called inhuman treatment. Boris Johnson said officials need to take immediate action. Joined now by the lawyer and former professional cricketer Amjad Khan. Hello to you, Amjad Khan. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. What did you make of the testimony yesterday?
Well, it's been an interesting couple of days, hasn't it? I think on one hand, we've been mourning the win, Australia's win of the World Cup, but still celebrating the cricket. It's been a fantastic tournament. And on the other hand, we've been listening to this guy from Barnsley who said that cricket almost cost him his life. I found the testimony compelling. I found it very factual. I found him very credible. And obviously it was very emotional. And I think it proves once and for all there's a systemic problem.
What's your experience been?
I think I've been very fortunate. I wasn't subjected to any of that. But that shouldn't deter from the fact that there is a big problem. I think the last few days, a lot of ex-players of Asian background have reached out to me. I think that it proves once and for all that this has been going on. And even though it didn't go on with me, it didn't have an effect on me, it doesn't mean that other people's weren't subjected to this.
Indeed, and absolutely not suggesting that for one moment. I just wondered if you often must wonder yourself why you weren't subject to the same sort of offensive behaviour and comments that other players have been.
I think I was fortunate. I was in two very, very good clubs, and at Kent and Sussex, and I was with good people. I think the environment there was good. I think there was a tradition of South Asian players coming in, overseas players, and I wasn't a victim to that. But as I said, I've been contacted by an ex-county player who's in a dispute with the ECB at the moment. I've been contacted by another high-profile ex-cricketer who wants to come forward, another county player who's on the verge of coming forward, plus someone at grassroots level who also wants to come forward. So, I mean, there is a systemic problem there. We can't deny it. I don't think we are, but the last few days has made us very aware of that.
And is there a common denominator between all of those gents that have come forward to you?
Well, I think first and foremost, these guys, they want to tell their stories. And I think the validity of their claims they want to have dealt with transparently and openly. I think they want the stories heard. And I think that's the least we can do to these guys.
And how do the stories that you've heard from these four guys compare and contrast to what we heard from Asim Rafiq yesterday?
I think a couple of them, especially one of the players, his story does remind me of Asim, because Asim not only tells the stories of racial bullying, he also just talks about bullying in general, and that shouldn't be tolerated either. So it's a mixture of the two. But the others are talking about it being a systemic problem. They felt that their race kept them back. So there are common denominators, absolutely.
And is it players that their teammates that weren't supporting them? Is that the challenge, or was it that the clubs weren't supporting them, or is it both?
It was both. I think a few of them were subjected to stuff from their teammates, but I think what was most hurtful to them was that the clubs that they were at weren't protecting them and were complicit in this abuse. And I think the reason that they're reaching out to me is because I'm of an Asian background. I now have a legal background. I'm still in the game as well. And I think they're unsure of the constitutionality of this and how the due process works. And I think that contacting me because of my legal background, so I can sort of guide them in the direction, because a few of them have also lost faith in the PCA, as Asim said, which is really unfortunate, because I think PCA do a lot of good work, and they've lost a bit of faith on the ECB. And I think a reparation has to take place there, because you can't fracture the game like that.
How do you see, given that they're asking your advice, what do you see happening next for those four players?
As I said, I think some sort of reparation, and if I can play a role in that, I mean, I'm not going to represent them legally, they're my friends. But if I think after probably this interview, I will be getting in touch with some people, probably through the ECB and the PCA, and figure out what due process is. How do we do this so it's fair on these guys who have obviously suffered, but also repair the damage that is done and start repairing that. But I think, as Asim said, the first thing is you have to listen to these guys. They want due process. They want to know that they will be listened to, and they won't be miscredited.
Do they still play?
Yes, at some level, yeah.
Okay. And they haven't been put off the game of cricket by the way that they have been treated. Is it a minority of players that they feel have treated them inappropriately and they still want to play, or have some of them just completely lost heart and hope with the game?
I think they love the game. We love the game. And it's often our first love. I think it's very difficult to fall out of love with the game, but they have lost faith in the system. And as I said before, that needs to be repaired, because that will literally break the game in half if this continues. But some of them have been through what Asim went through. They had to go find themselves again, pick themselves up, get involved in the game again. But the scars are still there. And credit to Asim, because he's given guys an opportunity and a chance to come forward with these things.
Sure. Amjad, I haven't purposefully pressed you on the names because you don't have their authority to do that at this stage. But if they do want to talk to us, either anonymously or otherwise at some stage, then of course we would be very keen to hear what they have to say. For now, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Returning to another one of our top stories, latest inflation figures have been released this morning. What does a man who used to be a former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee think about that? That's Andrew Sentence. Mr. Sentence, thanks for joining us on the programme. What do you make of the latest figures? Good morning.
Well, they're not unexpected because we were expecting inflation to go over 4%. The figure this morning for the measure that the Bank of England looks at is 4.2%. There are some other scary figures, though, that have been released. The old retail prices index is going up at 6%, and the prices of goods leaving factories are going up at 8%. And I think what that tells us is this is not the end of the inflation surge that we're seeing. And I think as we get into the new year, we may well see inflation going up to 5 to 6%, which is nearly 3 times the Bank of England's target.
So what does it mean for mortgages and loans and salaries?
Well, the Bank of England ducked the challenge at its November meeting of making a very small rise in interest rates. I do think we will see interest rates rise, perhaps in the December meeting, but possibly more likely in the early part of next year. But interest rates are not going to go up very sharply, partly because the Bank of England is being quite reluctant to push them up. And so, yes, mortgage rates may go up a little bit, but not in a dramatic way, I think.
What does it mean for our economic recovery?
Well, the economic recovery is continuing. We've had a big bounce coming back out of the pandemic and the lockdowns. We can't expect the economy to bowl along at the same rate as it has done over the last 6 to 9 months or so as we've come out of some very severe restrictions. I don't think we should expect a very rapid economic recovery once that bounce has fed through into the figures. But we've had indicators that show that the economy is in quite good shape in terms of the labour market. We had that yesterday with record vacancies, employment rising, unemployment coming down. So I think the economy should be resilient to rises in interest rates as long as those rises are gradual and well communicated by the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee.
Yeah, been down for donkey's years, haven't they? One wonders once the mortgage rates start to go up, how long that might be in that trajectory for.
Well, they've been down at a real record low recently, 0.1%. Before the pandemic, they were at 0.75%. So going up to somewhere around about 1% shouldn't be too much of a shock for people. But the question is what then happens next. But I still think that probably if interest rates are going up next year, we'll see them rise to somewhere between 1 and 2%. That is still historically very low in interest rate terms. You might remember before the financial crisis, they were around about 4 or 5%. So as long as people are prepared, as long as these moves in interest rates are well communicated, I think it shouldn't be too much of a shock for the economy.
Okay. Andrew, I remember interest rates being at 15%. That's how old I am. It's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Andrew. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Did you know that if we all work together, we can really make a difference to the air pollution around our schools?
Yeah, we should really do that.
There'll be a chilly start to the day in places, especially the windy and showery north. Showers will affect Scotland and northern England during the morning, perhaps extending into Northern Ireland at times. Most other places look dry, with plenty of sunshine in the south. Gales may affect northern Scotland. The afternoon will see cloud thickening in the north and west, with showers being replaced by some drizzly rain. Looking at the UK's air pollution, levels are expected to remain low, but isolated pockets of moderate are possible in the calmer south.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, we don't want to put you off next summer's holiday, but my next guest is trying to stop Ibiza from being swamped by snakes. I know. A group of volunteers are working to catch the reptiles and protect lizards on the island, hopefully 1 or 2 tourists as well. Joining us now is Dean Gallagher, volunteer snake handler in Ibiza. Hello to you.
Good morning.
Tell me what you're doing.
Well, OK, we've got a big project going on. It's involving government agencies primarily, the Govern Balear and COFIB, as well as the Friends of the Earth and other volunteer groups. Tim Freitag, who lives in the north of the island, who makes traps. And basically what we're doing, we're capturing snakes from areas which have got high populations of snakes. Now, one thing I do have to point out from the very beginning, that the majority of the snakes are present around the north of the island in very rural areas. They don't tend to be in highly populated areas because they're absolutely terrified of humans. And so what we're doing is we're making traps at a very low cost and getting them out to rural villa owners, and with mice inside, which are safe. The snake is lured into a hole in one side of the trap and then just stays inside the box, and then we go and retrieve them.
So tell me about horseshoe whip snakes. What do they look like, and are they dangerous?
No, this is the thing that we need to make absolutely clear. In some press, they've sensationalized this so much and made the snake out to be something vicious and terrible and dangerous towards humans. This is not the problem. The problem with the horseshoe whip snake...
Dean. Show me the snake.
Well, the one I have at the moment is not a horseshoe whip snake. This one is it's called a ladder snake, but it's one of the two invasive species. Okay, so this one here, you can see it's a very young one. Okay. Doesn't like being handled too much, but you can just see it's perfectly handleable. If you pick these up by mistake and it gives you a little nip, they're not dangerous, they're perfectly fine. And yeah, I mean, in some parts of Europe, they keep these species of snake as pets because, they get used to the handler and they actually like being handled after a while. But the problem is not the interaction with the humans. It's a problem is the interaction with the local endemic species. And
they're lizards, aren't they? Tell us about the lizards.
Okay, I'm just going to put him back in the box because he's a little bit...
Yeah, do that. Yep, no problem with that. Thank you.
He's been handled quite enough today, so...
Yeah, back in his box.
There we go. Right, so basically we have a very popular wall lizard, which is the symbol of Ibiza. And they are endemic. You cannot find them anywhere else in the world. And some of them are blue in color, green in color. In some of the little islets, they go darker blue. Now, the problem is that the invasive species snake, namely the Herodura or the horseshoe whip snake, can actually swim. So it's been known to swim out to these little islets and it's wiped out whole populations of subspecies of these Ibiza wall lizard. Then the other lizard that we have here is the Moorish gecko. They're a little safer because they've got these kind of padded feet with lots of little hairs on. They can climb the walls and stay on the ceiling, so they're kind of safe from the snake. But the Ibiza wall lizard, the green one, isn't so lucky, unfortunately, because their habitat is inside the walls and inside the grooves of the rocks. And that's exactly where the snake can get into and find them.
OK. We are sadly out of time, but that's absolutely fascinating stuff. I'm glad you are doing that job and then we can come on our holidays and not have to worry about it. It's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
Thanks a lot. Much appreciated. Thank you. What would you do if somebody smacked your bottom? Fascinating reply from the Trade Secretary next.